Good afternoon, and welcome to the Virginia Bar Association's Practice Management Advisor webinar for March. I'm Paul Fletcher. I'm the Executive Director of the VBA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this program. As many of the programs that we'll be featuring in 2025, this one is about artificial intelligence. The topic is AI as your associate, legal researching with artificial intelligence. And presenting today will be our friend Jeff Schoenberger from Affinity Consulting, our partner in the VBA PMA program. I'll give it to Jeff in a minute, but I want to remind you that there is not CLE credit associated with this program. We put on our quarterly webinars for the entire membership of the Virginia State Bar as a service. So, Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Paul. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. And I do have the chat up as well. So if you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to interrupt me. It's generally easier, I think, to address them as we're on the topic than to come in at the end and say, oh, let me go back X number of slides or whatever. So I always like to mention as we start these that there are lots of great resources on the bar's website, including the ability to do consultations with me and a couple of other folks who monitor that line of communication. So if you have any questions, obviously, emails in the materials. Pretty easy to remember now. It used to be jschoenberger at affinityconsulting.com. Now it's just Jeff at Lawyerist. Much easier to remember. Much easier for me to write too. So you can also reach out that way or through the consultative link on the bar's website. Question already in the chat. Awesome. Yes, the materials are PDF'd. They'll be available however they distribute them, but the bar does have those. So let's talk a little bit, put a little frame of reference around so we have common ground when we're talking about what's going on in the last year and a half. As I've been mentioning on just about all the webinars and presentations I've done for the last year or so, you can't really do a legal tech presentation without talking about AI at this point. It's kind of expected. It's kind of one of the most interesting things out there, certainly I think. And so what do we mean when we're thinking about AI? What we mean is we're simulating the way humans go about thinking and reasoning and problem solving. And so in some ways, when we think of these characteristics, we're talking about, does it learn? Is it, reasoning? Is it going, even if you're thinking about like a chain of reasoning or something like a flow chart kind of thing, like if this, then that, is it reasoning through those? Is it problem solving? Is it understanding its surroundings? We see even some of that with like simple mobile apps that we have. Like if it knows your location and you say, where's McDonald's? It's not gonna, necessarily, it shouldn't point you to wherever their headquarters is in Illinois. It should say, here are the local ones because it knows where you are. It has some sense of its environment and the conditions in which you're asking the question. And then understanding of language. And I think this is one of the more interesting and sort of downplayed aspects of the kind of AI environment that we're in, is that you ask it a question and it makes pretty good sense of what you're asking. And I'll show you a little example later on where I totally like fat fingered a question and it still was able to figure out what I was looking for. So in some ways, artificial intelligence, it's old hat. Like we've had things that do some sort of reasoning or some sort of, figuring out based on things that it observes. That's how it knows kind of what to add to your Netflix queue or your other streaming queues. It's like, yeah, you watched comedies, you might like this, or you like dramas, here's a new drama kind of thing. Pretty straightforward. I heard someone once say that artificial intelligence is kind of like autocomplete on steroids. I think it's a little bit better than that, but fundamentally it's making, determinations on what's the most likely, what's the highest probability answer. So in some ways, it's like the autocorrect that you get on your phone. Of course, navigation kind of directions, we've seen those for a long time. Those require some awareness and perception of where you are, where you want to be, and what roads are closed or what roads are busy, that sort of thing. And then, of course, things that we've used for up to 10, 15 years at this point, different biometrics on our smartphones, now on our computers, all kinds of places. These require an ability to take in an image or take in a thumbprint or whatever it is, analyze it, see how well it matches with the ones on file, and then determine whether it should let you in. What's exciting, though, is that this generative AI, this is the new thing. This is where the software is essentially creating new material from something that you give it. It's not, analyzing and like, thumbs up, thumbs down, does this person get into this phone? It's saying it can write a paragraph, it could write an article, it could, create an image for you, et cetera, et cetera. So what is generative AI? It's a type of artificial intelligence that's using algorithms to generate new data from existing data. So everything that I showed you in the past, like it's not in the old AI, like original AI with reasoning and analysis. It's not creating a new TV show. It's not writing for you. It's most probabilistically saying, oh, you probably meant to type this word. It might try to autocomplete a sentence, hence the idea that generative AI might just be autocomplete on steroids. It's not building a road. It's not creating, it's taking what you gave it and trying to figure out the best way there. And again, it's analyzing whether you are your face or whether you look for your thumbprint looks like it should. So when we think about generative AI, we're talking about two kinds of components that go into how it works. We have a generative pre-trained transformer, a piece of software, a piece of programming that is created to function like a human brain. You train it on inputs such as large data sets. If you're somebody who's into copyright law, you probably saw probably 6 months, maybe a year ago, OpenAI, and I think Microsoft also, maybe some others were sued by the New York Times for the fact that it had that these, for training purposes, had taken a bunch of copyrighted articles from the Times, used them for training, and then even more so, OpenAI or ChatGPT in this case, the product that OpenAI has, was essentially spitting back parts of New York Times articles verbatim when asked questions about different things that the Times had reported on. So you train it on a large data set, ideally one that you've licensed or paid for, and it produces some output. It answers these questions. The generative portion of generative AI is that it learns patterns and structures of input to generate new data that has similar characteristics. So it's taking all of the stuff that it was trained on and is now able to create something that sort of resembles that source material. It might have some nice twists on it, but it ultimately has the basis in what it was trained on. So in some ways, what's old is new again. I mean, it's impressive with what it does, and I've been particularly impressed, and I'll show you how I've kind of used it a little bit on the like the marketing side and as a search engine. And there was an interesting article actually today in the Wall Street Journal about using a generative AI product like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or something as your search engine instead of standard Google. So it sounds super impressive, but in some ways, it's what computers have always done. You give the computer some sort of input, the computer takes that prompt, that information, that question, compares it to whatever data it has, and it returns a result. So what makes it super exciting? Well, it's a lot more data. Even if you had the intellectual, capacity and the, time and the computer technology to build a generative pre-trained transformer 30, 40 years ago, how are you going to train it? You would go license the Encyclopedia Britannica. So the amount of information that's available to train on makes it very, very useful, makes it relatively easy to get it up to speed and to have it, produce useful and interesting and workable results. And ultimately, the speed with which it can produce those results is also pretty darn useful. And that's one of the most obvious advantages generally if you pay for one of these products. So if you go from the free ChatGPT, which is what I use for the most part, into a paid version, one of the things you'll notice is that it returns results, returns generally better results and certainly faster results. So in some ways, it's what AI has always done. It's just doing it faster. It has more data to work with, and having more data to work with is what is particularly impressive. Although in some respects, you're seeing articles now that it's not going to be like, say, Moore's law with microprocessors, where Moore's law we're going to double the number of transistors every 18 months or so, meaning that the processors have gotten considerably better. And a lot of the generative AI stuff at this point, they seem to be hitting something of a wall. Like they're kind of plateauing as like how quickly it's getting better. The first 2 years, it was like, wow. And now it seems to have slowed down. Obviously, we're doing something for law firms, lawyers, we want to talk about the limitations and risks before we just throw a bunch of data in there and say, hey, what is this going to do? Biggest limitations, it's only as good as the data it can analyze. We don't need to relive or retell the story of that poor gentleman who will probably be, as long as AI is around in the legal industry, probably be one of the most famous people for that little article or that little brief he wrote for the, what was it, Avianca in New York. And he used ChatGPT, which did not have access to case law. And so it invented cases, sent them to real federal judges, but it invented cases. AI, whatever the product, is only as good as the data that it can analyze. It's also only as good as the question that you ask it. So if you ask it a poor question, you're going to get poor results. The more you can specify and you can tighten the question, the more likely you're going to get a relevant result. And we've got a little bit of an exercise on that a little bit later. And then third, a little bit of a combination. You could they could have the best data in the world, and you could write the best question in the world. But if the programmatic tie-in between your wonderful question and the marvelous data set, if that programmatic tie-in isn't very good, you're also at a risk of getting poorer results. And just a journal article from a couple years ago that there is a burgeoning industry of prompt writers in the same way that you could, if you were in the nonprofit space, there are people out there who excel at writing grant applications. There are now folks who are working towards being excellent prompt engineers. Risks of AI, these in some ways at this point are, or at least for us normal human business customers, more theoretical than actual. Obviously, data breaches are always a risk. So if you are, even if you're using a product that is designed for law firms and the AI product is not keeping your data and it's not training on your data, and so it would not only be business confidential but also reasonable to use for client work. If there is some sort of hack where that information that you had been interacting with is stolen, it's a data breach. And so that's obviously a concern with any electronic system. Model theft. So if we get to the point, and you can kind of do this, I was at a seminar in Illinois last summer where a gentleman walked us through how to create in the free ChatGPT your own little AI that would look only at Illinois statutes and a few other things that were free in Illinois. And essentially it became your personal family law chatbot within the confines of what good sources are publicly available. You AI for family law are only going to look at these resources. And so you can build that. I think you have to pay for the ChatGPT in order to build your own model. But if you built the best model and it was helping you with case law, that model is stolen. That's an advantage that you would have had that is lost. Data poisoning. So this is you or somebody else feed it a bunch of bad data or incorrect data. It's going to affect the results. It's like, making a cake with rotten eggs or something like that. Privacy violations. Obviously, this is the biggest thing that we think about when we feed information into one of these AIs for our clients or for our own use. What are they going to do with the data? How long are they going to keep it? How do they keep it, et cetera, et cetera. Thankfully, most of the ones that are legal specific are pretty darn clear because it's a competitive advantage. It's a requirement generally if they're going to sell to law firms. They're pretty explicit about the fact that they don't keep the questions you ask, including documents that you might submit as part of your prompt, as part of your question. Generally pretty clear that they don't keep those and that they don't use the information, sort of a corollary, they also don't use the information to train the model to make it better. I know, for example, probably a year or so ago, NetDocuments, wonderful document management system, was talking about the different exemptions and provisions that they got from Microsoft so that you could use Copilot, which is Microsoft's generative AI tool, on the documents that you had stored in NetDocuments, and that that data would be purged. It wouldn't be sent to Microsoft. It wouldn't, anything like that. So definitely those that are targeting law firms, you still want to make sure, but generally those that are targeting law firms are generally pretty darn good at the privacy aspects. As a rule, obviously check it out, but as a rule, the more that you are paying for one of these services, the more likely that your privacy is respected as a rule, but please always read the terms. And then lastly, decision manipulation. So think of this as, maybe like what your kid or grandkid might do if you try, and you can hopefully generally spot it when they do it. Like they try to, in the way that they ask a question, they're trying to pull a particular answer from you. You could do that too. You could phrase questions in such a way that you could make an AI more likely to produce a certain answer. AIs generally are people pleasers. They are very loath to tell you something isn't true or something can't be done. So they are, frankly, more likely to give you incorrect directions than they are to simply say XYZ can't be done. So keep that in mind. This is the issue of hallucinations. We touched on this a little bit, that poor fella in New York who will live in infamy. Again, this goes back to, in part, wanting them to be people pleasers or having them be people pleasers. And so keep that in mind. It's always worth checking the results that you get. And even in the free version of ChatGPT lately, you're getting essentially footnotes. They look like little favicons, little icons for a website that you can click on and see where the source of a particular line was. And you've had that in Copilot, the Microsoft product, even built into Microsoft Word and other products. You've had that for a while. So making it easier and easier to see what the source material is that produced a particular response from one of these AI products. Touch a little bit on AI and practice management, and then we'll dive into to some other products. So a lot of the web-based practice management products are incorporating either one of the broadly available AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot, et cetera, or they are in some ways doing that behind the scenes and then rebranding it. If a product, again, generally speaking, if a product has been built into a law practice management product that you are using, it is safe to use for client data, client confidential data, attorney-client data, all that sort of stuff. So if, for example, and I'll show you in just a minute here, Clio has Clio Duo. My Case has My Case IQ. I think last I looked, Rocket Matter was using like integration with ChatGPT, et cetera. If these AI tools are built in and incorporated into these law practice management products, they're generally safe to use. What we're seeing with what these products do is that they are taking the case information that you have stored, and they are making that accessible through questions and answers. And we'll do a couple of those live with Clio Duo. It's always a little dangerous to do it live with an AI tool because you can't 100% predict the results, but we'll see what it does. I do want to talk, before we get into playing with some of these, about how you might want to structure a prompt for one of these AI tools. So for example, I stole this either from Clio or from Lexis, I forget where, but it gives you a reasonable setup on how you want to approach asking a generative AI a question. You say, what role does the AI play? In this case, you're the representative of the father. What do you want the output from the system to be? Well, I want to have a legal memo. And then you give it issues, details about what's going on, and then you tell it, what is the purpose, or what's the purpose of the memo? What are we looking for as an outcome? And you say, well, the father wants to intervene in an adoption, and then it's going to go up and it'll churn for a bit. Honestly, if any of you have worked with summer associates or junior associates, that sort of thing, it seems like how you might define that question for one of them. And I think that's a really good sort of analogy, because in my experience, what you get back from one of these generative AI tools is what a good, reasonably competent intern might produce. So it works pretty well to think of it in that sense. And then you have that follow-up question down there at the bottom, that if you wanted to have the AI sort of argue against itself, what would it do? Question in the Q&A. For legal research, does the AI algorithm make use of legal databases such as Lexis, Westlaw, Supreme Court, federal court cases, et cetera, find the on-point cases, then analyze them and give a given legal issue and write a persuasive brief to advocate for the position of a client. You can do some of that if you are in the confines, and we'll talk about the three big products out there. If you're in the confines of something like Lexis Plus AI or Westlaw Precision or Fast Cases VLEX, I would expect it to do most of that. If there is a public Supreme Court cases would be publicly available. If Federal Circuit cases are publicly available, or you could, as I mentioned earlier, build one of those AIs within the confines of like a paid ChatGPT account. You build your own sort of model, your own sort of AI engine with point and click. We're not talking programming. Then it might be able to do some of that. But for most of what you're asking, you're going to be looking at one of the AI products from one of the three big research vendors for legal cases and treatises and so forth. So let's talk a little bit about the chat products that are built into your different law practice management products. Clio Duo will run a little bit live here in just a second. If you use FileVine, they've got 4 different products that help do different things. And Leap, MyCaseIQ, Rocket Matter, Smokeball AI. So depending on if you're already using one of these, I would generally start with them. And then if you think that it's not sufficiently good about then we're talking case information. We're not talking about like doing actual legal research. We're going to start with case information and we'll do legal research here in just a little bit. But I wouldn't say that, MyCaseIQ is so much better that you should leave Clio, for example, for it. They're all pretty equal in what they do. The one difference would be in the case of, say, FileVine, which is more of a volume practice. So it helps write demand letters, it helps fill out immigration forms, et cetera. So they have some AI tools that are unique to that practice area that, for example, Clio Duo isn't going to, do the demand letter necessary for you. It's going to be more about asking questions about your existing case information. So let's take a little bit look at Clio Duo and then we'll run it live. Like every other chat tool out there right now, you ask it a question and it churns and it produces a result. What sort of questions can you ask it? Well, you can access matter details. You can get up to speed on a matter. You can, list all the open matters for a client. You can retrieve client information, show me all the emails, retrieve contact details, that sort of thing, find documents in a matter, or get caught up on some case details. So let's do a little bit of that live just to show you kind of how it works. So let me bop over to Clio here. And if you've used any one of these practice management programs, this layout looks pretty familiar. So let's say I want to ask about whether anything has recently been uploaded to a particular matter. So I click on that little D, and it's just a chat window. So maybe I want to get caught up on maybe the Bugs Bunny matter since last month. Let's see what we get. No updates since last month. So then maybe we just say, tell me about the Bugs Bunny case. And this is all real time, so you get an idea of how fast these are generally working. So we've got 2 matters for Bugs Bunny. The first one, we have a dispute over a vegetable garden, and it's in our real estate practice area. I'm the responsible attorney. I'm also the originating attorney. We've got an open date. How much money is sitting in WIP that's therefore unbilled? Do we have an outstanding balance for the client? Do we have any money in trust? And what was the last document uploaded? And then we have a closed matter as well. That's okay. So let's say we want to know what was the last document? We already know the last document. What was the last communication on the open Bugs Bunny matter? Let's see what it says there again, real time. And so the last communication that we had was an email that I sent to Bugs Bunny about directions to Albuquerque. Let's say I wanted to go into the matter. Let's go ahead and we'll click into that matter. So general questions that you would, be able to find if you clicked in and you clicked around, but it's right there at the top. And in this case of Clio, that button's always there. So it doesn't matter where you are in the program and you get to it. Let's go to the Documents tab. And you see we've got a few documents. Let's go ahead and take a look at the depositions here. And we have a deposition for Bugs Bunny. Let's go ahead and we'll hit View. And you see it's a deposition, and we could scroll through. In this case, it's very short because I use it as a demo. But you have this summary tab here. And so if I click on the summary tab, this is also an AI feature. And it's going to churn through. It's going to essentially read, quote unquote, read the document. And we're going to find out what it knows from having read the document. Again, we're doing it live, so it's thinking for a while. And what do we have here? We've got deposition. What is this? It's part of a case of Elmer Fudd versus Bugs Bunny. It's in the county of Looney Tunes, as it should be. We've got the parties listed there. We've got what the accusation is. We've got Bugs Bunny's responses, property lines discussion, and the conclusion of the deposition. And we could shorten it or lengthen it. Maybe that was too long for me to read. Let's go ahead and we hit shorten. Again, has to think for a bit. Gives you an idea of the timing of it. And so it would do this for individual documents. They also have a document analyzer that would do up to 5 documents. So you could take, 5 depositions and pull them together and get the salient points from all 5. Again, a little bit shorter, but generally the same information there. So if I go back, see what else we have in this file, we'll see if we can do something with the document analyzer. Actually, let's see if we can find a couple of documents. Let me go to a different matter here. So we've got one with some multiple documents. We'll see if we can do the document analyzer. So if I do, how many original emails do we have? Let's click in here. Only one. Let me go back up and we'll do these two together. I think the test is probably very short. And then we hit analyze. And so it's going to take both of those documents, compare them together, and pull out the relevant points that we might want from each one. And then we could ask it a question. What are the key points of these docs? And so again, we're going to let it think for a bit. Real time, live demo. And so depending on the product that you're using, again, I'm demoing Clio, lots of great practice management products out there. They would have different features. So if we were using FileVine, we would have been able to build a demand letter based on information in the system. And here we've got the two documents that gave us the key points from those 2 documents. And we could go through, and again, as I mentioned, with respect to Copilot and with respect to newer editions of ChatGPT, we do have little footnote type things. And so if I clicked on number 2, it tells us that it pulled it from the engagement agreement, and there's the paragraph where it thinks that that's the source that it produced for that, or one of the 2. And then if I click on this other one, this is also from the engagement agreement or the engagement letter, and it says, gives us a little clip of where that is from. So we can go through and we can kind of verify what results it pulled out. Pretty straightforward. A little bit of a limitation on the document analyzer in the case of Clio is you can only do 5 documents, so you can't get, oodles and oodles of discovery. And you might think, well, I could, if I got oodles and oodles of discovery, I could combine, 500 pages into, 5 PDFs and 500-page PDFs. It's 5 documents. There's also a file size limit, and I want to say it's 5 megabytes on a PDF. One of the ways to get around that would be if you've got Adobe Acrobat or something else that can essentially make the PDF look poor, like poorer quality text, as long as it's already been OCR'd, if you're not going to read it, you don't really care whether the text is 300 DPI or not, as long as that layer of OCR, of optically character recognized text, is back there. That's what it needs to analyze. So there are ways to kind of finagle these AI. So if you did have 500 pages, it might be workable. But that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's showing up in some of these practice management products that are kind of general use, general practice tools, to give you an idea of what's going on in some of the more specific areas. Let's talk about some new products that are kind of coming out on the market. I want to walk through the FileVine example just to give you an idea of if you're, in a particular practice area, if you do, PI, or if you do immigration and you're using Lolly Law, there's a good chance that there are some out there that are not like as general as the Clio ones. So with FileVine, for example, I talked about, we've got the AI fields, demands AI, AI immigration, or immigration AI, and sidebar AI. So with like the AI fields, you can upload a large amount of documents. So again, Clear doesn't say a large amount, but FileVine does, and get insights from AI. So it can summarize depositions. It can identify themes between multiple depositions, what the key points are. It can summarize things like police reports. It can even create, if you give enough documents, it can create a chronological list of pain scores from several medical reports. So if that's something that in the PI field might be pretty useful. And it can list inconsistencies and falsehoods and depositions. Lots of good things built into this fields analyzer. It can even do contract review. So it can identify different clauses and any, deviation from, generally accepted practices, things like that. The demands AI, pretty straightforward. It can take the information that you've put into the system, including documents, generate a demand letter to go to the insurance company or opposing party or whatever. Immigration is going to help you fill out the USCIS forms with information that's already in the system. And with the sidebar AI, it's going to take your activity feed and be able to give you case updates and then like a summary of what happened in the last 7 days. Clio, we tried to do that with the Clio Duo. If we were more active in our demo system, it would have been a little bit more exciting than to find out that nothing had happened in the last week or last month. So specific AIs that are designed to pull that information, and so it can generate one of these demands letters, for example. It extracts that information from the document, generates a letter, and then you get to review it and see how good it is. Give you an idea. You can either grab the stuff from already in the system, you could either upload it, and then here's kind of how it works. So you've given it a bunch of documents, and the AI question kind of in the background that you've told it to do is you want it to, draft an incident description, review the details of the incident report, examine different descriptions, craft a clear and concise description of the incident using the provided details, and be sure to focus on key facts. And so I've highlighted what gets fed in as a question to the AI tool for demands AI, and then based on the documents that you feed in, what's below that highlighted blue portion is a sample that the AI produced from the given documents. That July 5th, 2023, approximately 9:35 a.m., et cetera, at the intersection of Plantation Boulevard and CR 587 and Incorporated Hillsborough County, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, as with anything that you're sending out under your name or anything that you're filing, you're going to review it, make sure it's right. As I mentioned earlier, I like to think of most of these AIs as producing something that would be, on par with a, first-year associate, intern, summer associate, something like that. Probably save you some time. And but again, you do want to make sure that you take a look at it. With the immigration AI, you've got the available forms, and it's going to take that information from documents that you've uploaded to the system, fields that you've filled out into the system, and produce the forms that you select. And then with the sidebar AI, you get the ability to sort of ask questions about the cases, and we kind of saw a little bit of that in the context of Clio. And then Smokeball, another one out there that they're working on some really interesting AI enhancements for your law practice management software. They've got, in the same way that Clio has Duo, or Microsoft has Copilot, or Google has Gemini, they've given it a name. Its name is Archie. And they've also added some communications and some intake assistance as well. So Archie works fairly similar to what we saw in Clio Duo. You can ask it to summarize a matter, to analyze a document, to write an email or letter. We didn't see that with Clio, but it can do some of that, or even to draft a legal document or some clauses for you. So the idea of summarizing a matter, again, here's an example. Output is fairly similar to what we saw with Clio. Highlights the matter number, title, status. I think the Clio one gives you a little bit more information as far as last documents, what the work in progress or outstanding balance are. And then ultimately you do get some important notes broken out, which I think is a little bit more helpful than what we got like when we did that Bugs Bunny matter in Clio. Get a little bit more detail here. Reviewing of documents, this works fairly similar. The nice to the Duo version, what this does though, is that it will run like a side-by-side, which I think is really helpful. So for example, you could give it contribution affidavits or financial affidavits in a divorce case, one from Simon, one from Victoria, and it'll lay it out kind of in a table format, which is something you might otherwise do yourself or have an associate or have a paralegal or somebody else do for you. And in the same way that we saw when we did the demo of the document analyzer in Clio, we have little footnotes that will tell us where we got the idea that, for example, Simon is the primary income earner. So very similar features. And that's why I mentioned when we started talking about these law practice management products and their AI tools, that assuming the product you're using has some of these, the competition is going to line up fairly similar. Unless, for example, you're a PI attorney and you're using Clio and you were super amazed by the idea of the ability for FileVine to write a demand letter. Otherwise, you're looking at like they're all kind of running neck and neck, which is great for us as users and as consumers. So a little bit of a different layout for the document review. You would get fairly similar things from Duo, but it would just be, I think, laid out a bit differently. And then a couple of things that we see from Archie, like the drafting of correspondence we have, and also I'll share the other thing with just a little bit. We got a question though in the Q&A. What extent can we rely on AI to review documents as a taint filter in voluminous document cases to identify those which should be withheld in discovery for reasons such as privacy, client attorney privilege? If so, how quickly can it perform such a task, e.g. pages per hour? None of the ones that I've shown you have done would be able to really do that. For something like that, you would want to probably talk, well, you would probably want a document management system or look at like Logical, or I'm trying to think of the other ones. There are two or three, and shoot me an email and I can give you two or three names of the discovery products, the e-discovery products that are out there, and give you an idea of what their AI features are. The one I'm thinking of right off the top of my head is more document management, and so Net Documents ND Max can do some stuff like this, but if you're talking about reviews for discovery purposes, you would probably want to be looking at one of the big 3 or 4 e-discovery products. And so shoot me an email on that, and I can kind of get that information together for you on what their AI tools look like. So I would go that route. But none of what I've shown you would be able to take, 1,000 pages and give you a readout of, here, these pages should be withheld and these pages should not, or that sort of thing. But I think I'm expecting one of the discovery specific products might be able to do that. So again, a little bit more on the drafting of the documents. When it's finished, in this experience, it'd be similar to having one of the general, like from a usability, not from a information quality perspective, but from a usability perspective, it would be similar to using one of the kind of off-the-shelf AI products. So for example, it's kind of spat out this document, and then you're going to hit that copy button at the bottom left. paste it into Word or Google Docs or whatever you're using as your word processor, and then do the final editing and that sort of thing. And then communicate. So this is pretty interesting in that a lot of the practice management products out there have an AI component that sits just internal and just looks at the information in the system. Smokeball is the first I've seen that can take that same characteristics of analysis and summarization and apply it to, for example, the client portal. So what we have here is a client portal, and the client has sent some information. And instead of having to, maybe they're a very chatty client or something like that with a lot of their text messages, instead you can have the communicate tool in Smokeball summarize the client's communication and tell you what actually needs to happen. And then as you see down there, even though it's going to appear in line with the rest of the texting or instant messaging exchange that might include the client, you do get that proviso that anything that the AI is doing for you is visible only to internal users, only to staff at the firm. And then new intake forms. There are actually a fair number of products out there that will help you build client questionnaires, client intake forms based on AI type technology. This is an example of one that's built into a particular product. If you're not a Smokeball client, but you think this is amazing, I'd love to have AI build me a client intake form, a prospective client intake form for estate planning. There's a product out there called Typeform, Typeform, that is sort of a more attractive version of any of the sort of internet-based survey companies or survey websites. So you could, with Typeform, you can go in and you can say, use the AI wizard and create for me an intake form for estate planning clients who are between 45 and 55, have children, and have a net worth between $1 and $3 million. And it'll give you, again, should review it, but it'll give you a starting point. It'll take you away from that sort of blank screen or get through that writer's block. And so create that form, and then you can use that form in any number of email communications, because essentially what they provide is a web link, and the client goes to that web link. The advantage of something like this is the information is A, going to stay within Smokeball, and B, be available throughout that product. Whereas if you're using something like Typeform, you've got to have a way to get that into wherever your primary information storage is. There are a few new entrants in the field that are expressly targeting AI usage. I don't have a lot of personal experience with these, but if you're in the market for law practice management software, I would look at lawoffice.ai, and then also Allrise. And then one thing I really like about Allrise, or that really intrigues me about it, is that it's based on Microsoft Azure. So it's going to have Copilot functionality built in. It's going to integrate presumably really nicely with Microsoft Office type stuff. So Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, those sort of things. And so I think that might be a little bit of an advantage if you're in the market for a law practice management product. If you're happy with the one that you've got and they've added some AI features, it's probably worth a try. So can AI do legal research for you? It can certainly help you along the way. I would not say it can do it for you, though. Question in the Q&A section. In the case management, we use My Case AI. Can you ask the AI to generate a status report on a case and limit it to a certain time period? Probably, yeah. Let's see if we can do that with Clio. It won't give you like a properly formatted pleading that you would file with the court, but we could, for example, let's pop back here and say, let me go to Duo. We'll say, give me a full rundown, on the history of the Bugs Bunny case. Fun with live. Let me see if I go to the case. That might actually help too. So some of the AI products built into these case and matter management tools are kind of like self-limiting or self-refining. So if I go into, just find Bugs Bunny's case, if I go into it by being on this matter screen, I'm automatically preferring Duo to focus on the Bugs Bunny case simply because that's the case I'm in when I activate it. Let's give me a complete timeline uh, of the Bugs Bunny. Oops, matter. See what it gives us. They're doing it live, so we'll see. Think. So again, our demo system, very short in the information that we have in there, but it did give us essentially a readout timeline. And if you had some sample document that you could point it to, it would probably be a little bit better. But and if we had more calendar appointments, that sort of thing, it should be able to come reasonably close to what you might be looking for. But it would certainly be a good start. Again, I like to think of these as, what would a summer associate or an early first year kind of do for you? So, and it always is helpful to provide a model to these tools. So, if you go back and you look at, I think we did a co-pilot only webinar a while ago for you folks. Look at that, and you can say, create a new engagement agreement, use XYZ document as the model. In a similar way, you can probably, with some of these legal specific ones, say, here's a sample timeline, take the Smith case and produce one that's similar to it. I know, for example, you can do that within Net Documents, within their Pattern Builder Max product. Thing about Pattern Builder Max is you have to pay for Net Documents first. So if you're not looking for a document management system, that's kind of out of the running. But there are definitely, that technology exists. It's just whether it's going to be in the product that you're already using or that is in with the realm of reasonableness vis-a-vis what do you want to create versus what do you have to pay to get to the tool that will do it. So let's talk a little bit about the three big legal research products out there and kind of what they're doing with AI. As you might imagine, they've always been sort of opaque on pricing. I do have a little bit of a key on one of them, and I'll tell you about that. But Lexis, Westlaw, Fastcase, they all have AI-based legal research, legal drafting assistance available, assuming you're willing to pay for it. So with Lexis Plus AI, you've got conversational search that's fairly standard. Everything that we've done with Clio Duo, anything you do with ChatGPT, these are conversational searches. Summarization, intelligent drafting, document analysis, again, kind of table stakes. The benefit of something on the Lexis or the Westlaw or the Fastcase side is that I would feel comfortable with the results it produced if it cited cases and things like that. So that's the big benefit. Everything else that you see listed there, we've done in our time together today. Protege AI assistant uses LexisNexis content. That's probably the big benefit there. It also uses your documents, helps draft, summarize, generate legal documents, et cetera, et cetera. So what Lexis Plus and honestly what Westlaw Precision and what VLEX do isn't terribly unique from what is the action from, say, ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini. It's what do they have access to that would give it enhanced confidence in a legal market that it was producing the right result, that it was something that was trustworthy. And it is, as we talked about way back at the beginning of our time together, it's what they have as their training, what they have as their source material. So when they say that, here are the documents, here's a legal argument here's a draft document, and here's the legal argument in it, you can have a higher degree of confidence that it is an accurate representation of the case law and an accurate and reasonable argument to be made based on that case law. But the literal function of what the thing does is not terribly different than what you could do with any number of AI products out there. It's the data that's behind it that they can draw from. And they do have a little bit of pricing on their website. These are per use. So I assume if you subscribe, the price might, I mean, it'll be high, much higher monthly bill, but the per use price would either go to zero or drop considerably. Um, so if you wanted to query, you know, give it a bunch of documents and query them, you're looking at like 99 or $250 a run. If you wanted to draft something, you're looking at $250 a run, etc. So a little bit pricey, but again, this is the per use. So if you had a subscription that included Lexis plus AI, I assume you wouldn't be paying these per use rates. And this is the price for large markets. So it might be, if you're a true solo, the prices might actually be higher than what we're seeing here on a per use basis. With Westlaw Precision with CoCounsel, if you've been following AI for more than the 3 years that it's grabbed a lot of people's attention, CoCounsel was one of the early products to really try to bring AI into the fore with legal drafting and legal research. And being one of the leading companies, they were eventually purchased by Westlaw probably a year and a half ago, something like that. And that's been their CoCounsel product has been rolled into I think it's a new tier of Lexis or a recent tier of Lexis called Precision. And the features that you're going to see there probably look familiar because it's AI assisted research. You answer queries accompanied by authoritative links. So answering queries, you're still typing prompts. You got to remember how to write those prompts. But ultimately, again, the sort of the big draw is what is Westlaw going to back it up with? It's going to back it up with their giant library of cases and treatises and so forth. Mischaracterization identification. This is one of the things that you wouldn't necessarily see in a general use AI that you do get in some of these legal specific ones. So you upload the opponent's pleading and you could have it analyzed and, Westlaw can come back and say, they mischaracterized the holding in Smith v. Jones or something like that. And so that's sort of unique in the same way that when we looked at Filevine, they've got some things that are unique for the PI market. This is definitely a unique AI feature for the legal market. Jurisdictional surveys, comprehensive 50-state surveys on legal topics. I have a client who has paid for this Precision, especially or specifically to get these jurisdictional surveys. And there are, hopefully you're sitting down as you're watching this, there are 3 people in his firm. He's the attorney, 2 support staffers. And he signed up basically gold package, top level, Westlaw Precision, CoCounsel, all the AI things. They are paying either $2,100 or $2,700 a month on a 3-year contract. Little pricey, but it's worth it for him specifically for these 50-state surveys. So again, feature that Westlaw, possibly also Lexis and Fastcase could build based not so much on the uniqueness of their AI capabilities, but a little twist on AI plus their vast historical library of material. Claims Explorer, match factual scenarios with applicable legal claims. Again, great things to have, probably saves a bunch of time. It's something that you would otherwise assign to an associate. Drawing again on their vast knowledge in the library and less on necessarily the AI tools, because the analysis that would go into this from a programmatic standpoint isn't terribly different than what we saw in Clio Duo or what you could do in some other ones, but you got the library there. And identifies cases that are frequently cited together, even if they don't cite each other directly. So I think that's particularly nice. And then Outline Builder, that I'm not sure is super unique, but it's nice to have. And so again, here's the published pricing for Westlaw Precision plus CoCounsel, starting at $248 a month. That would be not the gold package, and that would probably be one user. And then if you want, you can actually do CoCounsel Core for a little bit less per month. So if you don't need access to the Westlaw portion of it, CoCounsel itself would run you $225. Honestly, between those two, I'd just get the Westlaw level. And then the last of the big 3 out there, Vincent AI by VLEX, probably know it better by as fast case. And so again, look at what they're offering, kind of table stakes vis-a-vis their competitors, and in many ways, analysis and extraction. We've seen some of that already. Generating defenses, that's pretty nice. That goes in similar to some of the AI components from Lexis and as well as from Westlaw. And creating follow-up questions for clients, that would be pretty handy, especially if you're receiving documents for discovery purposes or deposition purposes or whatever, and you do the extraction and the analysis. You could also have the AI generate some of the follow-up questions. And then, as it says there, think through possible legal arguments and help users analyze relevant cases. Again, probably table stakes among the big three as far as AI tools, but also something that draws on the vast library. So theoretically, if you could have access to all of the case law that would be published, you might be able to, through, say, a paid ChatGPT account, create your own bot, own AI engine that might do some of this. But again, it's not all going to be publicly available, and it's not all going to have been pre-analyzed and that sort of thing through either the readers or through software that one of these big three would have. Again, pricing kind of in line with the Westlaw version with the CoCounsel Pro. A little bit more expensive depending on the firm size. So $230 in this case. I think it was $248 for Westlaw, that sort of thing. And then in addition, we have practice-specific tools. So we talked a little bit about that with FileVine, for example. But if you are looking at particularly contracts, these seem to be popular targets for AI tools, simply because I think that drafting and that analysis go most easily and most sort of quickly with contract work. So draft-wise, it does DMS type storage for your contracts and can help you, pull clauses, have model documents, that sort of thing. And then, you can do some tagging. It can help you so that it can help you build a landlord-friendly or tenant-friendly lease, for example. Legalmation is going to help with document generation, particularly with respect to depositions. There are also there's a relatively new one out there for deposition. So if you're in the litigation context, Deposely, Deposely, is a pretty new entrant. If you go to the Lawyerist website, I think we have a page up on it, or we will very soon. So if you want some help, essentially it offers to be your second chair in a deposition. So you load in the materials you're thinking about asking. It's going to help you refine your questions. And then if you're doing a Zoom meeting, a remote meeting for your deposition, it can actually, I presume you have to get permission from whomever else, but it can join that deposition and serve as a second chair and say, oh, in real time, deponent said X, Y, and Z, and it pops up and it says, oh, you should ask a follow-up question about, 1, 2, and 3. And so that seems pretty helpful, especially if you're on the smaller side of the firm, as far as firm size, or, kind of feel like you're alone against an army. If you go into a deposition, having this tool, at least for remote depositions, might be pretty handy. Lexis plus Create, this would be in addition to the AI, be like an add-on, and it works within the Microsoft Office tools. So assuming you're using Word to draft, that would be way to go. And then a couple others. Paxton I really like for contracts, and then also Spellbook is pretty good too. And then always tons of general use tools. We didn't talk about many general use tools with AI. But if you're looking for lead generation, lead management, Lawmatics has LM AI, helps you draft. And then I did mention a couple times ND Max and Pattern Builder Max. Those are both Net Documents products, and you have to pay for Net Documents, and then on top of that, you can add these. And then if you're looking to do any document processing, like we're thinking about how do I tell the associate what to do, or how do I make sure they do it correctly, take a look at ScribeHow. It's the website is scribehow.com. It essentially watches you do something, and it will make a PDF guide, a video, annotated screenshots, that sort of thing from it. So if you've been putting off documenting your processes, that's something that's worth using. There are a bunch of slides that we didn't kind of get to. If you have any questions on those, feel free to reach out. I do want to mention we've got a lot of those legal specific tools on our directory. So if you go to the Lawyerist website, or if you click on that link in the slides, it'll take you right there. And with that, I will wrap it up. There's my email, and I'll turn it back over to Paul to close us out.
Jeff, we appreciate it as always. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's program. Thank you, Jeff, once again, for a lot of great information. And put on your calendars for June 25th, Wednesday, June 25th at 12 noon. We have Small Firm Tech in the Age of AI is the next program in the DBA PMA webinar series. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time.